The small hospital was quiet, but the quiet was tense. Outside, the sounds of World War II echoed through the streets, soldiers shouting, boots marching, and distant explosions shaking the ground. Inside the hospital, children huddled together, their small faces pale with fear. Some were crying softly. Some were holding tightly to small blankets or broken toys. In the middle of this chaos, a young nurse moved quietly through the hallways. Her uniform was neat, but her eyes were sharp and full of worry. She was kind, gentle, and loved every child in her care. But kindness alone could not protect them now. She had seen what the enemy was capable of. Children were being taken away, sometimes for work, sometimes for cruel experiments. Every day more were lost. She paused in the hallway listening. The footsteps outside were getting louder. The soldiers were coming closer. She whispered to herself, "I need a way to save them all, but how?" Her voice was barely audible, like a secret shared with the walls. At her feet, her dog sat silently. A small, clever-looking animal with bright eyes, the dog seemed to understand everything. It tilted its head and wagged its tail as if it was listening. The nurse smiled faintly. "Maybe you can help me too," she said. The dog barked softly, almost in agreement. She looked around the hospital. The windows were barred. The doors were locked. Guards were everywhere. It seemed impossible. How could one person, even with a clever dog, save hundreds of children from such danger? The thought made her chest tighten. But giving up was not an option. As she walked past the children's rooms, she noticed their frightened eyes following her. One boy, no older than 7, whispered, "Will we be safe?" The nurse knelt beside him and smiled gently. "I promise we will find a way. You just have to trust me." The children's trust made her heart heavy but also gave her courage. She had to think fast. She had to find a plan that was bold, maybe even crazy. And she had just the companion for such a plan, her loyal dog. She crouched down beside the animal and whispered instructions. The dog barked quietly, then nudged her hand. It seemed ready. She had trained it to follow her commands, to move quietly, to fetch small items, but she had never imagined using it for something like this. Could a dog really be part of a plan to save hundreds of children? Outside, the guards were talking loudly, distracted by the sounds of the city under attack. One of them kicked a small barrel, sending it rolling across the street. The noise made the nurse freeze for a moment, her heart pounding. But then an idea sparked in her mind, a daring, almost unbelievable idea. She stood up slowly, glancing at the children through the doorways. "Tonight," she thought, "we will try something no one has ever done before." The dog barked softly again, as if agreeing. She picked up a small bundle of supplies, food, a few blankets, and a tiny map she had drawn in secret. Everything had to be perfect. She moved from room to room, quietly signaling to the children who were old enough to understand. "Stay close. Follow my lead. Be very quiet." Some children nodded, their eyes wide but trusting. Others clutched their small hands over their mouths, afraid to make any sound. The nurse's mind raced. Every step had to be careful. Every move could be the difference between life and death. She thought of her friends, her family, the city outside, and the countless children who had already been taken. Her chest tightened with fear but also with determination. Then she paused at the main window. Outside, the soldiers were distracted by a sudden commotion. A cart had fallen over in the street, and 2 guards ran to investigate. It was only for a moment, but it was enough. A spark of hope lit in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, this was her chance. The dog barked quietly and ran ahead, sniffing the hallway as if it knew the plan was about to begin. The nurse whispered, "This is it. Tonight we start." She glanced once more at the children. "Stay brave. Trust me. Everything will be okay." Her heart pounded as she looked back toward the guards outside. They were so close. If they noticed even a small mistake, everything could be lost. She took a deep breath and whispered to herself again, "I know it sounds crazy, but it might just work." And then, in that tense moment, with the dog at her side and the guards distracted outside, she felt the first flicker of hope. A plan was forming in her mind, one that no one would expect. And if it worked, it could save hundreds of children from the horrors of war. The scene ended with her eyes narrowing, the dog's ears twitching, and the distant sounds of soldiers moving through the streets. The audience is left on edge, wondering, what is this crazy plan? Will it succeed? Or will it fail before it even begins? The night was quiet, but the nurse's mind raced faster than ever. She could hear the faint hum of soldiers outside, the occasional clatter of boots against stone. Every sound reminded her of the danger. One small mistake, one wrong step, and everything could be lost. but her determination burned brighter than fear. She had made a promise to the children: she would find a way to save them. Her dog, a clever little companion with sharp eyes, sat patiently beside her. It seemed to understand the weight of the night. The nurse knelt and whispered, "We need a plan, and it has to be perfect. Are you ready?" The dog barked softly, almost in agreement. She moved quickly to a hidden corner of the hospital. There, behind a small stack of crates, was a secret room she had been preparing for weeks. Inside were supplies, blankets, small bundles of food, and tiny maps showing the safest paths through the city streets. The walls were lined with charts, notes, and sketches. Every detail of the rescue was written down, every risk carefully calculated. The nurse studied the maps once again. She traced her finger along the narrow alleys and side streets that the guards rarely patrolled. Then she paused at a detail that made her heart skip a beat. There was a small, almost invisible path near the river. Guards never went there. It was dangerous, steep, dark, and full of hidden rocks, but it could be the perfect escape route. She looked at the dog and whispered, "This is where you come in. You'll lead them. You'll keep them safe. You can do it." The dog wagged its tail, eager and alert. She had been training the animal for weeks, teaching it to carry small items, to follow commands quietly, to move quickly and carefully. But this was more than training. This was a mission of life and death. Her mind drifted to the children. How many could she save tonight? How many would follow her plan? Each one had to be careful, had to trust her. There was no room for mistakes. She could almost hear their frightened whispers and see their wide eyes in the dim light of the hospital. Suddenly, a soft sound outside made her freeze. A soldier's shadow passed the window, too close. Her heart jumped, but she stayed calm, holding her breath until the figure disappeared. The dog nudged her hand, sensing her tension. "Stay calm," she whispered. "We only have one chance." The nurse began rehearsing the plan in her mind. The children would gather quietly in the secret room. Each would carry a small bundle of supplies. The dog would guide them, moving silently ahead, showing them the safest path through the dark alleys. The nurse would follow, keeping an eye on every child, ready to intervene if anything went wrong. It was a risky plan, maybe even impossible. But she had no choice. Every day the children stayed here was a day closer to capture. And yet, the more she thought about it, the more a strange sense of hope grew inside her. She had prepared, trained, and thought through every detail. If it worked, hundreds of children could escape tonight. Hours passed as she readied everything. She whispered instructions to the children who were old enough to understand. "Follow the dog. Stay quiet. Don't stop. Trust me." Their small nods filled her with courage. They were brave. They trusted her, and she could not let them down. Finally, the moment arrived. The guards outside were distracted by a sudden commotion. A cart had fallen over in the street, sending 2 soldiers running to investigate. The nurse's pulse quickened. This was her chance. She motioned to the children to follow her lead. The dog barked softly and ran ahead, moving like a shadow. The children followed carefully, one by one, their small hands gripping their bundles. The nurse stayed at the back, making sure no one fell behind. Every step was tense. Every noise could betray them. But the plan worked so far. The dog led them down narrow alleys, avoided guards, and kept them moving. Halfway through the path, a sound made the nurse freeze. A dog barked in the distance. Another animal, this one belonging to the enemy. The children's small faces turned pale with fear. The nurse held up her hand, signaling them to stop. She whispered, "It's okay. Stay quiet. Follow me closely." The dog took the lead again, moving swiftly and silently. The group reached a small clearing near the river. The moonlight reflected on the water, and for a moment, it seemed as if time had stopped. The nurse allowed herself a small breath. The first step of the plan had worked. One child, then another, all moving safely. But she knew the danger was far from over. Guards could notice them at any moment. One misstep, one loud noise, and everything could be lost. She looked at the dog, who was waiting patiently, ready for the next command. "We have to keep moving," she whispered. As the first signs of dawn approached, she felt a mixture of fear and hope. This was only the beginning. The plan was working, but every rescue would be harder than the last. Still, she believed in her mission. She believed in the courage of the children. And she believed in the clever dog at her side. The nurse whispered to herself, "If we can do this once, we can do it again. And again. We can save them all." The dog barked softly, as if agreeing. The audience is left on the edge, wondering, will the secret plan continue to work? Will the dog guide the children safely every time? Or will the guards discover their path and end everything? The night had grown darker, almost as if the shadows themselves were holding their breath. The small hospital was silent, except for the soft shuffle of feet and the faint rustle of blankets. The children waited quietly in the secret room, their eyes wide with fear and hope. Some clutched their small bundles of supplies, others held onto each other, trembling. The nurse knelt beside them, her face calm and gentle, hiding the storm of fear inside her. "Tonight we take our first step," she whispered. "The dog will lead you. Follow carefully. Stay silent. Trust me." The dog, trained and loyal, barked softly in response. Its eyes shone in the dim light, sharp and alert. It seemed to understand the importance of the night, the lives depending on its guidance. One by one the children stepped forward. The nurse counted them silently. Each child's heartbeat seemed louder than the last. The first child, a little girl with wide brown eyes, took a deep breath and followed the dog. Her small hand clutched her blanket tightly, but she moved with courage, trusting the nurse's instructions. The nurse stayed close behind, guiding the others and keeping watch on every movement. The hallways were narrow and dark. Every creak of the wooden floor made her pulse quicken. Outside, the distant sounds of soldiers patrolling the streets reminded her how fragile their plan was. The first challenge came almost immediately. A guard had stopped near the hospital's main gate, his boots echoing in the empty street. The nurse froze, holding her breath, and motioned for the children to hide in the shadows. The dog pressed close to the first child as if shielding her. The guard paused, then moved on. A quiet sigh escaped the nurse's lips. It was a small victory, but it reminded her how easily everything could go wrong. She continued to lead the children through narrow alleys, following the path she had memorized on her tiny map. Every turn, every shadow, every sound had to be calculated. As they reached the first outdoor path, the wind carried a faint noise, dogs barking in the distance, a warning that danger might be closer than she thought. The children's small hands tightened on their bundles. Some whispered, "Are we safe?" The nurse smiled gently, even though fear gripped her heart. "We're safe for now," she whispered. "Keep moving. Trust the dog." The dog led them skillfully, avoiding guards and obstacles. It paused at times, looking back to make sure every child was following. The nurse's heart swelled with gratitude for the animal. It was not just a pet, it was a hero in its own right. Halfway through the path, the first child stumbled. Her foot caught on a rock and she fell with a soft cry. The nurse rushed forward, quickly helping her up. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're brave. Keep going." The children watched silently, learning that courage sometimes meant getting up and continuing, even when scared. As they moved closer to the river, the final challenge appeared, a narrow bridge over rushing water. The planks were old and worn, creaking under every step. The children hesitated, fear evident in their eyes. The nurse knelt beside them. "One at a time," she instructed. "Follow the dog. Watch your step. We can do this together." The dog went first, stepping carefully across the bridge. It paused at the edge, looking back to the children. Slowly, one by one, they crossed, guided by its steady presence. The nurse followed the last child, her hand ready to support anyone who wavered. Suddenly, a shout rang out from the distance. A guard had noticed movement near the river. Panic surged through the nurse's chest. "Keep going," she whispered urgently. The children quickened their pace, guided by the dog, their small feet splashing silently through shallow water. The nurse's mind raced. If the guard followed them, all would be lost. But the dog ran ahead, weaving through rocks and trees, leading them to a hidden path she had discovered weeks before. It was risky, but it was their only chance. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached a small hidden clearing near the edge of the river. The moonlight reflected on the water, and the nurse allowed herself a quiet breath. The first rescue had succeeded. Every child was safe for now. The nurse knelt in the grass, checking each child. Relief and exhaustion washed over her. The children hugged each other, smiling faintly despite the fear still lingering in their hearts. The dog barked softly as if proud of the success. But the nurse knew this was only the beginning. One rescue did not end the danger. Guards could discover their path at any moment. The next night could be even more dangerous. Still, hope had been born tonight. One child saved. One mission completed. One step closer to saving hundreds more. As dawn approached, the nurse looked at the children, her heart full of quiet determination. "This is just the start," she whispered. "We will save them all, no matter what it takes." The dog sat beside her, ears twitching, ready for the next challenge. The audience is left on edge, wondering, Will the next rescue succeed? Will the dog continue to lead the children safely? Or will the enemy uncover the secret path and end everything? The night after the first rescue, the hospital felt different. The children huddled together, whispering quietly, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope. The nurse moved through the hallways, her steps careful and light. She knew the first rescue had been a success, but the danger had not passed. In fact, it had only grown. Outside, the enemy had become suspicious. Guards who had once ignored minor noises now paid attention to every sound. They whispered to each other, comparing notes, frowning at the strange patterns of the night. "Something is happening here," one muttered. Another guard barked an order, sending a shiver down the nurse's spine. The nurse glanced out the window, her heart pounding. The moonlight cast long shadows across the streets, and she could see a few soldiers patrolling more carefully than before. Their eyes scanned every corner, every alley. The risk had multiplied. If they discovered the hidden path, everything would be lost. She knelt beside the children. "Stay calm," she whispered, smoothing a small boy's hair. "We will be careful. No one can touch you if we follow the plan exactly." The children nodded, though fear lingered in their small faces. The nurse knew she had to act quickly. She had to adapt or the enemy would stop them. The dog sat alert, ears twitching, watching the shadows outside. It seemed to sense the tension in the air. The nurse whispered, "We need to be smarter now. The guards are watching more closely. We cannot make a mistake." She spent the next few hours preparing new supplies and reviewing the escape plan. She had hidden bundles of blankets and food along secret spots in the city, places only she and the dog knew. Each child would carry a small item, nothing more, to avoid detection. She drew quick sketches in the margins of her map, marking where guards had become more vigilant and where the safest paths might be. As midnight approached, a soft sound startled her. A guard's boots clicked closer to the hospital. The nurse froze, her heart hammering. She pressed herself against the wall, holding her breath. The dog barked softly, a warning. The footsteps paused, then continued. Relief washed over her for a moment, but she knew this was a warning. The enemy was getting closer to discovering her secret. The nurse gathered the children in the secret room. "Tonight we go again," she whispered. "We must be even quieter, even faster. Trust the dog. Watch your steps. We will get through this." The children nodded, their small hands gripping each other tightly. Some had tears in their eyes, but they followed her instructions without question. As they moved through the hallways, the nurse noticed the subtle changes. The guards were patrolling in pairs now, their steps slower and more deliberate. Their eyes scanned every shadow. The nurse's pulse quickened. The path they had used for the first rescue might no longer be safe. She signaled to the children to take a small side door she had noticed days before, one that led to a narrow alley the guards rarely used. The dog led the way, moving carefully and quietly. The children followed, stepping lightly over broken tiles and stones. Every sound made the nurse's heart skip. She glanced behind them frequently, making sure the guards had not noticed their escape. Halfway through the alley, the nurse heard a voice behind her. "Stop. Who's there?" A soldier had spotted a shadow. Panic surged through her, but she stayed calm. "Move quickly," she whispered to the children, urging them forward. The dog barked softly, then darted ahead, creating a small diversion. The soldier ran toward the noise, giving the children a precious few moments to escape. The nurse's mind raced. This close call reminded her that the enemy was learning. They would grow smarter, more dangerous. She had to adapt faster, think quicker. Every rescue from now on would require new tricks, new paths, and clever distractions. The stakes had risen. They finally reached a hidden spot near the river, the same one they had used before. The children paused, exhausted but safe. The nurse knelt, checking each child, her heart pounding. "We made it," she whispered, though she knew the danger was far from over. The guards were suspicious, the paths were being watched, and every night could be their last chance. The dog sat beside her, panting softly, ears alert. It had become more than a companion, it was a hero in its own right, guiding the children with intelligence and courage. The nurse reached down, stroking its head. "We can't let fear stop us," she said quietly. "We must be clever, brave, and quick. That is how we save them all." The children huddled close, some whispering to each other, some looking at the dog in wonder. They had begun to trust the plan, trust the nurse, and trust the small, clever animal that led them through danger. As dawn approached, the nurse watched the first hints of light touch the water. She felt a mix of relief and unease. The first rescue had worked, and the second had been close to discovery. Every step forward carried more risk. The enemy was watching more closely, and the secret of their rescues could be uncovered at any moment. The audience is left on edge, wondering, will the nurse and her dog continue to stay ahead of the enemy? Will the children remain safe, or will suspicion catch up with them? What clever trick will she use next to outsmart the guards? The nurse could feel it, the stakes were higher than ever. The guards had grown more suspicious, patrolling more carefully, questioning minor noises, and observing the hospital with sharper eyes. One rescue had worked, 2 rescues had barely slipped through their fingers, and now, every night brought new danger. Yet the nurse refused to give in to fear. Too many children depended on her courage and cleverness. Her small, loyal dog sat alert by her side, its eyes bright and watchful. It had become more than a companion, it was the key to every plan. With it she had saved children before, and now she had a bold idea. She could save even more. She could scale the operation, reaching hundreds, even thousands of children over time. The nurse spent hours preparing. She marked secret paths on maps, noting where guards were less alert and where the children could move unseen. She gathered supplies, carefully labeling them so each child had food, blankets, and a small bundle of essentials. Then she trained the dog for new tasks, leading multiple children at once, carrying messages, fetching small items, and alerting her to danger. The children noticed her energy, her focus, and they trusted her implicitly. She moved through their rooms, whispering instructions. Tonight, more children will leave. Be brave. Stay together. Follow the dog. A few of the older children nodded, determination in their eyes. Even the younger ones, frightened as they were, obeyed, their trust in the nurse unwavering. Night fell again, darker and colder than before. The city outside seemed quieter, but that quiet carried tension. Every shadow could hide danger, every sound could betray them. The nurse led a group of children through the hallways to the hidden room where supplies were kept. The dog ran ahead, scanning the path, alert to the slightest noise. As they moved outside, the nurse noticed new guards posted along familiar streets. Her heart raced. The operation had to be faster, smarter. She signaled to the children to stay low and move silently. They hugged the shadows, creeping along narrow alleys. The dog barked softly, guiding them past patrols, around corners, and over debris. Halfway through their path, the nurse paused. She noticed a new obstacle. A guard had stationed a dog near the riverbank. This new challenge could ruin everything. She whispered quickly to the older children, giving them instructions to distract the guard dog with small stones and careful movements. Meanwhile, her dog led the children along a different route, weaving through underbrush and hidden paths. The children followed with wide eyes, some trembling, some gripping each other tightly. The nurse stayed at the back, moving silently but watching every step. One misstep, one stumble, one sound too loud, and the guards could discover the hidden path. Yet the children's trust in her gave her courage. She whispered, "Stay calm. Keep moving. You are safe with us." By midnight, they reached a small clearing near the river, a secret location the nurse had discovered weeks before. It was safe, at least for now. The children crouched in the shadows, catching their breath, their eyes shining with hope. The nurse checked each one carefully, counting heads, making sure no one was left behind. She smiled faintly at the dog, who wagged its tail in quiet satisfaction. Together they had done it again. But the nurse knew scaling the operation meant increased danger. More children meant more steps to cover, more risks, more chances for discovery. The guards would eventually notice the patterns if she wasn't careful. Every rescue now had to be faster, smarter, and more daring. Over the next few nights, the nurse expanded her operation. She trained more dogs, using them to guide separate groups of children along hidden paths. She created signals and codes to communicate silently with the children. Each night became a careful, dangerous dance, a test of courage and intelligence. The small hospital that had once felt so vulnerable became a hub of secret activity, a place where hope moved quietly in the dark. The nurse often paused in the early morning hours, watching the children sleep safely in hidden locations she had prepared. Her heart ached for the ones she could not reach yet, but she reminded herself that every child saved brought her closer to the goal. She whispered to herself, "We can save them all, one night at a time." The dog lay beside her, ears twitching at every sound, ready to act at the first sign of danger. Together they had become an unstoppable team, clever and courageous. The nurse's plan was no longer just a hope, it was a growing, living operation. She had begun to believe it could work, that hundreds, even thousands of children could escape the horrors surrounding them. But with the operation expanding, the risks grew. The enemy's suspicion had not waned, it had intensified. Guards began noticing strange patterns, small signs of missing children, unusual movements at night. One night, as the nurse prepared yet another group for rescue, she paused, realizing that the enemy was smarter than before. Their eyes were sharper, their patrols closer, their questions more probing. Every move had to be perfect. The audience is left on edge, wondering, will the nurse's expanded operation continue to succeed? Can she outsmart the increasingly watchful enemy? How far will she go to save these children? The nights had grown colder and the shadows longer. The nurse felt the weight of every life she was trying to protect pressing heavily on her shoulders. The operation had grown larger. More children, more risks, more paths to navigate, but the enemy had also grown smarter. Guards patrolled more carefully, dogs sniffed the air with keener senses, and whispers of suspicion traveled faster through the streets. The nurse paced quietly in the hidden room, her small, loyal dog at her side. Its ears twitched at every sound, its eyes alert and sharp. "Tonight will be different," she whispered, checking her supplies. "We cannot afford mistakes. One wrong move, and it's all over." The children gathered silently, holding their bundles, their small faces pale but determined. Some of the older ones tried to steady the younger ones, whispering encouragement. The nurse nodded at them, a quiet smile on her lips, but fear churned inside her. The path had to be perfect. The timing had to be exact. And the guards could appear anywhere. They moved through the hallways, shadows among shadows. The dog led the way, weaving silently through corners, sniffing the air for danger. The nurse stayed at the back, counting heads, watching for any signs of trouble. Every creak of the floor made her heart pound. Every distant shout made her grip her supplies tighter. Halfway through the first alley, disaster almost struck. A new patrol of guards, larger than usual, had taken a route the nurse had not expected. Their boots rang against the cobblestones, echoing through the narrow streets. The children froze, eyes wide with fear. "Stay low," the nurse whispered. "Follow the dog. Don't stop." The dog barked softly and darted ahead, creating a small diversion. It ran across the alley, knocking over a small stack of barrels. The noise drew the attention of the guards, who moved toward the sound, shouting and searching. The nurse signaled the children to move quickly along a side path she had spotted earlier, a narrow route between two crumbling walls. The children shuffled forward, some stumbling over loose stones. The nurse bent down, helping a little girl regain her balance. "We're almost there," she whispered, her voice calm but urgent. "Keep moving. Trust me." But the danger was far from over. Another guard appeared at the end of the path, blocking their escape. Panic surged through the children, and the nurse's heart raced. She glanced at the dog, who barked and ran in a wide circle, drawing the guard's attention away for just a few precious seconds. The nurse seized the moment, leading the children past the obstacle, guiding them through narrow, twisting streets the enemy had never noticed. Every step felt like a heartbeat away from disaster. The nurse's mind worked furiously, calculating every move, every sound, every shadow. She whispered instructions, her voice barely audible, but clear enough for the children to understand. "One step at a time. Follow the dog. Don't stop. Almost there." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the hidden clearing near the river, their safe spot at least for now. The children collapsed in the grass, exhausted, some sobbing quietly with relief. The nurse checked each one, counting heads, making sure no one had been left behind. Her small, clever dog wagged its tail, proud of the group it had guided to safety. The nurse let herself breathe for the first time that night. The rescue had worked, but just barely. Every close call reminded her how fragile their operation was, how quickly everything could be lost. The enemy's suspicion was growing. They were closer now than ever before. One mistake, one loud sound, and the secret paths could be discovered. She knelt beside the children, smoothing hair, whispering words of reassurance. "You are safe for now," she said softly. "But we must be brave. We cannot give up. We will save them all, one step at a time." Her eyes wandered to the river, the moonlight reflecting on the water. The dog sat alert beside her, ears twitching at every sound. Together they had faced danger, confusion, and near disaster, and yet they had succeeded. The nurse knew that courage, cleverness, and trust had carried them this far, but the road ahead would only grow harder. The audience is left on edge, wondering, will the next rescue succeed? Can the nurse and her dog continue to outsmart the ever-watchful enemy? Or will a single mistake finally reveal their secret and end everything? The stakes had never been higher. One night, one path, one small dog, and countless lives hung in the balance. The nurse whispered to herself, barely audible, "We can't fail. Not now. Not ever." The city was quiet that night, but the tension hung thick in the air. The nurse knew that tonight would be the most dangerous rescue yet. Months of careful planning, hundreds of children saved, and countless close calls had led to this moment. She had learned from every mistake, adapted to every new obstacle, and trained her small, clever dog to perfection. Yet even with all her preparation, she could feel the weight of risk pressing down on her. The children gathered quietly in the hidden room, their eyes wide with fear and anticipation. Some had been rescued before, some were new faces, children who had been hiding, waiting for someone brave enough to help them. The nurse knelt beside them, her voice calm and steady. "Tonight, we will save the most children we've ever saved at once," she whispered. "We must be brave. We must stay quiet. And we must trust the dog." The dog barked softly, ears perked, ready to guide them through the night. It had become more than a companion, it was their leader, their protector, their silent hero. The nurse led the children through the hallways, counting each one carefully, making sure none were left behind. Outside, the city streets were darker than usual, the moon hiding behind clouds. Every shadow seemed alive, every noise a potential threat. The guards were more alert than ever, their suspicion growing with each missing child. The nurse's heart pounded, but she forced herself to stay calm. Panic could ruin everything. The first challenge came quickly. A group of guards appeared near the main alley, their boots clanging against the stones. The children froze, fear shining in their eyes. The nurse took a deep breath and whispered, "Follow the dog. Move quickly and quietly." The dog darted ahead, weaving through the shadows, leading the children along a hidden side path the nurse had discovered weeks before. Step by step, they moved through narrow alleys, over fallen debris, and past guards who seemed almost too close. The nurse guided the slower children, her hands steady, her voice reassuring. Each heartbeat felt like a countdown. One wrong move, one loud sound, and everything could be lost. Then came the greatest obstacle, the river. The water was higher than usual, the current stronger, and the old wooden bridge creaked dangerously under every step. The children hesitated, fear gripping them like ice. The nurse knelt beside them. "One at a time. Watch your step. The dog will show you the way. We can do this together." The dog went first, stepping carefully across the bridge, stopping to ensure it was safe. One by one, the children followed, each step measured and careful. The nurse stayed at the back, guiding the youngest ones, ensuring none fell behind. The sound of the water rushing below made her heart beat faster, but she focused on the task at hand. As they reached the other side, a shout rang out. A guard had noticed movement. Panic surged through the group. The nurse whispered urgently, "Keep moving. Almost there." The dog ran ahead, creating a diversion by knocking over a small stack of crates. The guards, distracted, ran toward the noise, giving the children a precious moment to escape into a hidden forest path. The nurse led the group deeper into the trees, the children following quietly, their fears slowly giving way to relief. They emerged in a small clearing she had prepared months before, sheltered, hidden, and safe. The nurse counted every child, ensuring all were present. Hundreds had made it safely tonight. Tears filled her eyes. She knelt in the grass, touching each child's shoulder. "You are safe now," she whispered. "All of you." The children hugged one another, some crying softly, some laughing quietly with relief. The dog barked softly, tail wagging as if proud of the mission it had completed. The nurse looked at her companion, the small dog who had risked everything with her. "We did it," she whispered. "We really did it." The dog barked again as if confirming their success. Together they had saved hundreds and over time, thousands of children from the horrors of the war. As dawn broke, the city began to stir. The guards, confused by the growing number of missing children and the clever paths they had taken, could only shake their heads. They would never discover the secret of the nurse and her dog. The small hospital, once a place of fear and danger, had become a beacon of hope, a place where courage, cleverness, and determination could change lives. The nurse watched the children play quietly in the safe clearing, their laughter small but full of life. She felt a quiet pride, a deep satisfaction. Each child saved was a victory, each life preserved a testament to courage and clever thinking. She had risked everything, faced danger countless times, and never given up. Her voice was soft, almost to herself. "We've done something incredible, and no one will ever know how we did it." The dog sat beside her, its eyes bright and watchful. It had been her partner, her hero, and her friend. Together they had turned the impossible into reality. The audience is left with a mix of awe and inspiration, wondering, how far can courage, intelligence, and determination go? How one small nurse and her clever dog changed the lives of thousands. And how even in the darkest times, hope can shine brighter than fear. The story ends with the nurse and her dog sitting in the clearing, watching the sunrise over the river. Hundreds of children were safe, and the impossible had been achieved, not with armies or weapons but with heart, cleverness and a little bit of courage.